Hello, 안녕하세요. Welcome to the K-League United podcast. Matthew Binns here, and I'm joined by the regulars, Paul Neat. Hello, Paul.
Hello.
And Andrew Farrell. Hello, Andrew.
Hi guys, how are you doing?
Not too bad, thanks, Andrew. I see you sporting your Suwon Samsung Bluewings shirt for this podcast, and for good reason, I believe. As we're diving into K2 this week, where the party has started. Um, And it is ongoing for quite a few teams, not so much for a few others. We're going to be touching on our talking points, much like last week's podcast where we touched on the top 6 things from K-League 1. Nobody was counting at the end, and don't think we'll be counting by the end of this one either. But we're going to go through some of the biggest stories from K-League 2. Andrew, you were at the grounds this weekend. You were at the big one, both in terms of the fixture itself and the crowd size there. You were at Incheon United versus Suwon Bluewings, matching your shirt as well. We are going to probably touch on that one of those teams first, but I mean, how was that game?
It was wild. I remember messaging you guys and saying there's 2 red cards in the first half, and then Paul said something like that's wild, that's class something. It's like, oh wait, no, there's been 3 now. In terms of the crowd, 18,100 or something. I was talking about this with my brother after the game, and you think apart from England and Germany and maybe a team like Deportivo La Coruña in the second division of La Liga, it's not too often around the world you'll see 18,000 people at a second division football game outside of a handful of places in Europe. Really, like the crowd size was fantastic. The atmosphere was brilliant. We saw a bit of everything. We saw some football, we saw some volleyball, we saw a little bit of diving, as you mentioned before. We saw a bit of rugby. In terms of value for money, it was right up there. I mean, people paid 12,000 won or something to get in, and they probably saw 4 or 5 sports in 90 minutes.
Commonwealth Games all in one place.
Indeed, and one of the teams that was struggling to play football, Suwon Bluewings, they didn't have the best of times, did they, Andrew? How have they been these opening 2 games?
I thought they were pretty good against Ansan Greeners on the opening weekend of the season. Now, the caveat there is obviously that they're playing against the Ansan Greeners, who are not one of K-League 2's most prominent forces. But they destroyed Ansan for the vast majority of that game. And I wrote about this on the K-League United website afterwards. They only scored 1 goal, and obviously goal scoring has been a thorn in their side for season after season after season now. But there were just enough hints in that game that I thought, with Bruno Silva on the left side of a front 3, with Matthias Serafin on the right-hand side, and Ilichenko started the game on the bench, there were just enough signs that maybe the goals will come because they created so many chances and so many good chances. But for the second weekend in a row, Matthias Serafin has just left his shooting boots at home. And I thought it was a good game on Saturday against Incheon, and I thought Suwon probably shaded it in the first half an hour without being in any way dominant, but the game was completely flipped on its head when there were 3 red cards in the space of about 15 minutes. And when the first red card went for Suwon, Incheon had a player sent off. They made a tactical change. They brought off Kim Ji-chan and they put on Bruno Silva, who's just more offensive. He's just a better player to watch. He really attacks players, gets to the byline, and he's really good at. I think he had 6 or 7 assists for Eland last season, so he's a great provider. But then they had Iki J sent off about 90 seconds after he was brought on, and whatever momentum they got from that red card, they managed to hand it straight back. I'm not sure either of the 2 first challenges, the 2 first red cards were red cards. I don't know what you guys thought. I thought on another week they might not have been given as red cards, but either way, it was 10 versus 10. And once it went to 10 versus 10, we'll talk more about Incheon later on, but Incheon were brilliant once they went 10 versus 10, then obviously 9 versus 10, whereas Suwon struggled really badly to stay in that game. They had 2 great chances midway through the second half. Serafin first, and then Bruno Silva had shots cleared off the line. Just epic defending from a young Incheon backline. But 1 goal in 2 games. They've started this season the same way that they started last season. A nervy win over pretty mediocre opposition. away this time. It was home last season, and then they followed that up straight away with a defeat against another championship rival. It looks like, unless Ilychenko is in the team more often, I don't know if he's struggling with injury. I find it hard to believe he is, because he played 40 minutes on Saturday. I don't know why you keep him on the bench for 50 odd minutes and then playing for 40 minutes if he's carrying an injury. But unless he starts to find the back of the net for them, I have serious reservations about Suwon, and I'd be more inclined to believe that they will slip back into the chasing pack like they did last season, as opposed to staying close with Incheon. They just again, 11 on 11, they looked fine. But once it went 10 on 10, the numbers were still even. They looked really, really poor from that moment on. So yeah, worries about Incheon, as worries about Suwon. That's not going to get any easier for them, because they got to travel to Mukdong this weekend. They lost all 3 games against Incheon, against Seoul Yiland last season. And just lastly, just on that red card, whatever about Kwon Wan-gyu and his incredible stupidity to get sent off, what really stuck out, and you could see this in the highlights as well, is that he tried to get himself sent off like 3 occasions before he was finally sent off. There were a couple of rash challenges. There was one time where he just barged Magosa out of the way, and you could see Magosa spotted the fact that Kwon Wan-gyu was flustered. I don't know what the word is to describe him, that like he had a mental breakdown on the field of some sort, and he was in the referee's ear after every challenge looking for a second yellow card. And ultimately, he didn't really need to go to the referee after Kwon Wan-gyu stuck two arms in the air and volleyball slapped a pass back into it. It was just bizarre stuff. So, I thought Byung Sung-hwan should have taken him off earlier, because it looked like he was going to get himself sent off, and ultimately he did. So that's Suwon. It's not looking great, but if they can win on this weekend and Sunday, I think it is, against Seoul Yiland, they'll feel a lot better about themselves.
The problem with San Dijk, as they call him here, Kwon Wan-gyu, a poor man's Van Dijk, is that he's not very quick, and when on the turn, facing his own goal on a yellow card, he's a liability. So yeah, Andrew, it is surprising that he didn't get taken off, but just foolishness. But just in general, Suwon, I expected more from them, obviously, from these first 2 games, more red cards than goals, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to look at their XG and just sort of see how much that they had at least tried to create for their front line. Their XG is 5.99 from the first 2 games. That's the second highest in K-League 2 behind Incheon, which would suggest, I suppose, eventually that things might even out. Third for total shots as well, 32. Incheon have had the most at 35. And then Bucheon are second with 33. And shots on target is pretty good as well, 37.5%. That's third in the league. But as you say, Ilychenko, I think I did see rumblings on FM Korea, obviously, or on the forums, that he was a doubt for the start of the season through injury. So if I was a Bluewings fan, I'd be hoping that he can get minutes under his belt quickly. Like he got 40 on Saturday, get more minutes under his belt, get him in the team, get him starting, because I know they've got people like Bruno Silva, who's got the second highest XG in the league, and Kim Ji-hon, who's got the third highest. Ilychenko, when you have him in the team, it's a completely different animal. If you're any team in K-League 2, obviously apart from Incheon, and you see him starting, psychologically you think, oh God, it's going to be a long afternoon. But then when you see him on the bench, you must get a little bit of a lift seeing him not involved. So yeah, I thought we'd see more, but with that XG, which is very high from the first 2 games, you would suggest things would even themselves out and they will start scoring eventually.
Yeah, you would.
Sorry, I just want to just jump one thing on the Ilychenko thing. I thought this because I was watching him a lot when he came on Saturday. And I'm not trying to make the comparison between him and Stefan Magosa. They were neck and neck for top goal scorer last season. But Ilychenko spent pretty much all of his 40 minutes on the pitch arguing with the referee. He took a tumble at one point as well. Just a ridiculous dive in the box. It wasn't the only time that a Suwon player did that. when he did come on, I don't think it's unreasonable to expect a little bit more from your main signing over the winter as well. He just seemed to get involved in a lot of petty stuff off the ball, whereas Magosa was hands down the best player on the pitch. Just took the game by the scruff of the neck in the second half. And I mean, ultimately, that was the difference between the two sides. Like Paul's talking about XG there. I think apart from Kwon Ang-gu and his lack of pace, otherwise, I think the teams match up pretty well. But having a guy like Magosa in the team is just absolutely massive for Incheon.
Well, shall we move on to Incheon? I know we had a slightly different running order, but it feels like we should probably really touch on them because how dominant they were. And, well, Andrew, again, you were at the match. Do you want to kind of run us through like how they fared?
Yeah, well, one of the things that really stuck out about Incheon, so obviously Yoon Jung-wan is a new manager, and you never know how a guy like him is just going to settle at a club like Incheon. They've just been relegated. He had brought Gangwon to second or third last season, and he's obviously one of the most highly rated managers in K-League, but he drops down the division, and you're wondering, like, is this where he wants to be? Obviously signed a contract, he must, but were there no more offers, would he not have been better off hanging on for something else? But it was just interesting listening to some of the Incheon fans before and after the game on Saturday as well. There is a sense that something is beginning to build there, and it's not like Incheon were awful last season. It was only really in the last 2 months of the season that they found themselves in the bottom three. They spent as much time in the top six as they did in 12th over the course of the 2024 season. But unfortunately, they're obviously in 12th at the worst possible time. But three members of their back four, Kim Gon-hee's only 22, Park Young-sub is 20, and Choi Sung-gyu, the right back, was outstanding. He's only 19 years old. So there are a lot of good young players coming through. But then sitting in front of them, Jerso Fernandez, Lee Myung-ju, Kim Bo-sap. I know Moon Ji-won was sent off in the end, but they have Kim Do-gyok to come on off the bench. There's a lot of great experience in front of that young, inexperienced three members of that back four, and then they can bring Harrison Delbridge and Barrow off the bench. It's a type of depth that no other side has in this league, and I know it might sound a little bit hyperbolic here, but they could well be the best side ever to play in K-League 2. I find it really hard to believe that they're going to drop any point or too many points between now and the end of the season. So unless Suwon, I still believe that Suwon are their closest challengers throughout the year. Unless Suwon are able to score goals and they're able to translate that XG into actual goals, then they could end up just running away with this championship. They were okay when it was 11-on-11. It was a nervy enough start, but Incheon believed in the post-match press conference that they would have won the game had it been 11-on-11. Ironically, Suwon were saying the same thing. I guess that just shows how close the two sides were. But the flick of the switch when EKJ was sent off, because Suwon didn't have anybody to cover at left back, and Jerso Fernandez, who didn't have a brilliant game overall, he was substituted much earlier than he might normally be. But that 10-minute spell before halftime, he was at his most deadly. He was brilliant down that right-hand side. And just Stefan Magosa, I think we already expected him to have a great season, but his assist for the second goal was absolutely outstanding. And you could see what it meant to him. You could see what it meant to everybody in Incheon. And there was a lot of smiling, a lot of laughing on the pitch, the post-match press conferences, the mix zone. This could be a really, really fun year for Incheon. They got a great back line that most of them are pretty young. They got a really experienced midfield, and they got Magosa up front. So unless Suwon are able to stay with them, this could be a total formality, I'm afraid.
Yeah, no, I've actually wrote down in my notes that they're actually probably well equipped for a cup run, I think, to be honest, because K-League 2 may just very well be a formality based on these two games. It may be a bit presumptuous, 2 games to be making these sweeping decisions, but still, they have such talented players that should really be at K-League 1 level. I mean, Magosa obviously won the Golden Boot, it goes without saying, but the signing of Modo Barrow, I honestly think, I mean, it did get enough media attention, but it didn't get as much as I think it should have. That is a massive signing because he was one of John Buck's best players when he left John Buck. And he hasn't been gone for that long. And he has only made 2 substitute appearances so far for Incheon, but both times he's been introduced, the impact he's had, and he looks full of energy, he looks fit, which was something that perhaps plagued him slightly towards the end of his John Buck time. But when he hits that form, he was getting goals every week for John Buck in the final straights for 2 seasons in a row, key in winning multiple trophies. And you can see it here at Incheon. He's kind of just picked up where he's left off, and you have to think as soon as he gets more settled, as soon as he gets that partnership going with the likes of Magosa and all his other teammates as well, you think that could be really something. I think the only better signing was that of the manager, bringing in Jo Sung-hwan. That was probably the biggest. So, Incheon, I was very impressed with them.
They love Barrow as well. As soon as Barrow came on, like anytime he got a run, like people at the edge of their feet, they were screaming. You could hear screaming from the other end of the stadium, from where we were in the press box. He's electric, and there's an expectation almost that he's going to do something. He's going to create something out of nothing when he goes tearing down the left wing. So yeah, you're right. And Kim Bo-sop had a really good game on the left wing. It was his assist for the first goal. They have this level of depth in multiple players in pretty much every position now, that I just don't think anybody else can contain. Again, we could be sitting here 8 weeks from now and they might be down a 4th spot, having lost 4 games in a row. But it's just hard to imagine where that sort of loss in form could possibly come from.
Indeed. Well, it may come next week because they're off to Tancheon, where they'll be taking on Seongnam FC. And just like Modo Borough, I'm going to play you in here, Paul, because you've been quiet for a while. Paul, take us through Seongnam. Bit of surprise. You're on mute as well, which is also surprising.
There we go. Well, last season was one for sorrow for the Magpies, but it's been rounds 1 and 2 for joy so far. Their opening weekend win over Hwasong was their first win since the 15th of June last year. Okay, they went on a 20-match winless run. So starting with a win, albeit against a brand new team to K-League, was massive. And Ruiz scoring after 19 minutes in itself was massive because they score early. It sets the tone for the match. And by getting off to that winning start, it sets them off on the best possible foot. Hong Chang-bom then made it 2-0, 6 minutes into the second half. So again, the timing of both goals has been very important. That first 15-minute spell of the second half, obviously, Hwasong were going to try and get something back into the game, but Seongnam were able to nip that in the bud early and then go 2 goals to the good. So the timing of the goals is very important. And then in round 2, a draw against Chungbuk Cheongju, not ideal, but they came from behind. So there's a bit of character there. And again, the timing of the goals, because Ruiz scored after 31 minutes. They went down 1-0 after 7 minutes. So after 7 minutes, you can see the goal at home. You're thinking, oh, this could go, after what they had last year, that disastrous campaign last year, that could have gone either way. But they equalised. They got a goal back before half time, and they probably could have gone on and got another goal or 2. But so I think what we've seen from this Seongnam team so far is character, which is what we need, because last year obviously it was a disaster. And I also want to talk about the goalkeeper, Yoo Sang-hoon, obviously, who's won the K-League with FC Seoul. He's someone whose career has kind of taken a strange turn, and he looked low on confidence last year. He made some quite big mistakes, some things that it's like if you make those kind of mistakes, it's hard to recover from, and that was the kind of season that it was for him. So he'd only kept 1 clean sheet for Seongnam before that. Last season was his first season with the club, but he kept 1 clean sheet, and that was a 0-0 draw away to Cheonan in round 3. So almost exactly a year ago. So his the clean sheet that he got on the opening day against Hwasong was his first clean sheet in a Seongnam win and his first clean sheet at home for Seongnam. So it's all these little details. Ruiz scoring in the first two games of the season. They've ended this disastrous winless run, and they've obviously had to not rebuild the squad, but get some big earners and big names off the books. Lee Jong-hyop's gone, Ali Bayev's gone, but they've shifted Shin Jae-won to right back, which I think is a very, very good move. He's obviously a good player, usually a winger, but not really someone who's attack-minded enough. But right back, it makes very, very good sense. And Vinicio, obviously the centre-back that they got from Chungbuk Cheongju, has proved so far it's looking to be a good signing. So Seongnam, even just for Diogo's sanity, I'm happy to see that they've started well. They're a club that shouldn't really be in K-League 2, let's be honest with you. They shouldn't have been sat bottom of K-League 2 last year with the squad that they had. So it's a very encouraging start to the new season for them.
Yeah, they've looked very good, I thought. Very good, playing some good counter-attacking football. I had actually wrote Shin Jae-won change position as well in my notes, but fair play, you've already mentioned it. I also thought Park Ji-won looked pretty good as well. I think Samuel Andrade as well, both key in the construction in terms of bringing the ball forward and things. But yeah, good to kind of see Seongnam faring better than they have done in previous years. It felt, I was watching it and it felt kind of odd because I expect more, Tanchon, it used to be fans. I think I'm trying to find a nice way of phrasing it, but watching the highlights from them and just it's such a massive club in K-League history to just be what they are in present day, or what they were rather at the end of the season. So as you said, it is encouraging for the fans, for the club, to see them playing a bit better on the pitch. But they've only played Hwasong and Chungbuk Cheongju as well, so we shouldn't really get overexcited. But you can't choose the fixtures that put in front of you. And one team that also couldn't choose the first two fixtures put in front of them was Bucheon FC 1995, recording a 3-1 win over Chungbuk Cheongju as well. Poor Cheongju, they're having not the greatest start. We're not talking about them today though. And Cheonan City, who they also beat 2-1. I mean, two teams you'd expect Bucheon to beat. I feel two very different performances though. Against Chungbuk Cheongju, they looked pretty good. I felt they looked very deadly from set pieces, despite not actually scoring from a set piece. It was Lee Hyung rather who scored twice. A rare brace, rare goals to be honest for the player, but a rare brace as well. A fantastically struck first effort, a well taken second. But then their second match, it saw the reverse. Cheonan City should have been by far away and ahead, looking at the highlights. And I feel like the Cheonan haven't kind of got that firepower up front. The window has obviously not been very kind to them in that regards. But Cheonan they got a red card. They got a player dismissed not long after taking the lead. And then Bucheon, they just brought themselves back into it. It was a powerfully taken header by Hong Sung-uk, apologies, and powerfully taken second goal by Jefferson to put Bucheon ahead. So Bucheon are top of the league, 6 points, 5 goals, fair enough, but I'm not overly convinced by what I've seen. And Andrew, you went to Bucheon a couple of times. More than a couple of times, to be honest. You went to Bucheon perhaps far too many times.
And I'll be there this Saturday.
And you're going to be there this Saturday. I was going to say that. Yeah. I mean, we're talking about easy fixtures. Cheongju, Cheonan. They've got Busan next, but we'll talk about them soon. But how are you finding Busan? Not Busan. You can tell me about them later. But Bucheon.
Well, Bucheon finished. They finished 6 points ahead of Cheonan City last season and 9 points ahead of Chungbuk Cheongju. So I think what's working in their favor, like you mentioned this a couple times already, is just the fixtures. That in any other part of the season, you win back-to-back games against Chungbuk Cheongju and Cheonan City, and nobody really bats an eyelid at it. It's just that those two fixtures, a comfortable set of fixtures, have arrived for them at the start of the season. But what I will say in their, for them, is just that their next two games are against Busan IPark this Saturday, and then Ansan Greeners at home. So there's a really good opportunity for them to go 4 from 4, and perhaps even put a little bit of daylight between them and almost anybody else in the league. The problem, of course, because they're just, you're going to eventually run into the good sides, and as soon as they finished against Ansan Greeners, they got Soliland away, they've Gimpo away, and they've the Bluewings at home, and then 2 weeks after that, they've got Incheon at home. So, like, the crucial thing for obviously for Bucheon is just if they can go 12 points from 12 in those first 4 games, it'll give them like an unbelievably good start to the season. Their record against Busan's really interesting. The last 30 matches between these two clubs have finished 10 wins each and 10 draws, which is pretty extraordinary stuff. I do expect Bucheon to win on Saturday, and I kind of hope they're going to win on Saturday. Just because they're going to be there, and Kazuki's always a good interviewer after a game, so get in touch with him. Rodrigo Bassani, any team with Bassani in their side in this league is going to stand a chance of winning more than 50% of their games. And Bassani is still there, obviously. So I thought they recruited pretty well. They got Galeko over the winter as well, from formerly of Gangwon FC and Jade United. So Kucha Roll, I think, has arrived from Jeonbuk Motors. That seemed to just slide in under the radar a little bit. I didn't realize he'd gone there. He hasn't featured yet, as far as I know, but like, there's obviously a lot of experience there for later on in the season. But the other thing as well, just about Jeonbuk Cheongju, like, they played Jeonbuk Cheongju 6 times before the weekend, and 4 of those games that ended in a 0-0 draw, and the other 2 games that ended in a 4-0 win or a 4-0 loss. So sometimes you get these really bizarre results in K-League 2. But I expect them to win on Saturday. I expect them to be at Ansan Greeners away. The problem is, though, I remember talking to Kaski last season about this, and they would record a good win over a team like Busan, who were gunning for promotion towards the top of the table, but then they would go to Wa Stadium and lose. And this is this has always held Bucheon back. It's one thing losing to Soliland away, losing to the Bluewings, let's say, at home, but they shouldn't be losing games to Ansan Greeners, and they have that in them. So we'll know if they've made any improvement if they're able to go to Wa Stadium 2 weeks from now, a week and a half from now, and win that game. And if they can go 12 points from 12, it would be a truly magnificent start for them. No
Indeed.
Nielsen Jr., though. Can I just bring that up? It's hard to watch them now without Nielsen Jr. It's very disappointing.
Yeah, it does feel like there is something missing from the league without his presence. But yeah, they are playing Busan IPark, and well, Busan IPark, they do seem to be missing something as well. Goals being that. They have played Gimpo goalless, it ended, and then losing the Nakdong River Derby to Seongnam FC 1-0 last weekend. And it's not looked very good on the pitch. I mean, they don't look strong in possession. They not really seem to be moving it forward that accurately. It seems to be mostly long balls, in my opinion. The goalkeeper, Gu Sang-min, I feel like he looks a little bit of a liability. It's not really clicking, and you know, Busan, they usually start failing at the end of the season, but it's kind of going wrong early doors this year for Jo Sung-hwan's team. I mean, should we be expecting better of them, Paul?
Yes. I mean, no goals after 2 games is pretty bleak, isn't it? XG of 2.24, which is the 4th lowest in the division so far. 2.24 doesn't sound that bad, but when you see that it's the 4th lowest, it is a pretty grim stat to look at. 20 shots is only slightly above average, about 24.86, but 20% accuracy is the 3rd worst in the division. So they are, I think, a little bit at the mercy of how fast their new foreign signings can kind of adjust and get used to the K-League, Gonzalo and Viero, because, you know, they've lost Bruno Lamas. Obviously, he started very well at Daegu since returning, and it makes you wonder, what was he doing at Busan for so long? But I'm also not convinced by some other signings that they've made, like Son Sok-young, who we saw at Gimpo, and then he had a weird spell at Bluewings, a weird signing for Bluewings, wasn't he? Really odd. Yeah. And then Yoon Min-ho as well. So just not enough goals in them, strange signings. And I think, Andrew, you said in the season preview, the big question is, what is Jo Sung-hwan doing at this club? I think he might be wondering that same thing himself, to be honest with you. It's just... If if you were an alien and you just landed on Earth and you were told Busan used to be a big club and they used to win things, you were like, nah, not buying it. You know what I mean? It's like you just wouldn't believe that this is or was a big club that used to win stuff.
Agree. Like, and so the Jo Sung-hwan thing I think is really interesting. I wouldn't be surprised if he's one of the first managers to go, which would be really sad. I can't get my timeline right here. I think it was November of 18 months ago when he was leading Incheon in the Champions League. It must have been November, December of 18 months ago. Yeah. So he's got like the fall from grace to be dramatic, but like Yoon Sung-hwan made the same drop down the division as well. But obviously going to Incheon with that stadium and that level of support that they have and those great young players coming through and Stefan Magosa and the team, the contrast between that and Busan, I mean, they're light years away from each other. And I'm glad you brought up the recruitment because the recruitment was terrible. They bought loads of former Bluewings players in. Jang Ho-ik, who just hasn't played football for 2.5 years. Suddenly he's the captain. He's playing on the right side of a back three. Just odd. There doesn't seem to be a massive amount of talent in that squad. And I wonder, is Jo Sung-hwan looking at thinking, I don't know what his motivation was for taking that job. It's not like, you don't feel like with Incheon, there's a project there. Like when they play in Gudok Stadium, everybody's behind the running track. There's only 3,000 people at the game. There's just nothing there. There's no reason to move to Busan IPark. And I don't know if he took that decision or if his agent pushed him that way, but that looks like, I mean, it sounds very harsh, but that looks like a career suicide move. I don't know why a manager of Jo Sung-hwan's ability and resume would make the move to Busan IPark.
Possibly to try and get it through in the playoffs, because that's kind of where he was, wasn't he, when he jumped aboard? But obviously it's Busan.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, on that bombshell, we are only going to do the 5 teams this week, even though there are 14 in the league, a never-ending list. Might be 15 soon. Yongin, it's happening.
Oh, Shihung next season as well. Once the stadium is finished.
16. It's just getting too many to count.
Every time I look at the table, there's a new team. So what's going on? There's a new team. Stop it. Stop. I click F5 and I refresh the page. There's a new team.
We may actually have to do an episode on these new teams at some point because it feels a bit churlish that we just kind of put them down to another Cheonan, another Cheongju. We might actually have to do a deep dive and see which might be the best of the rest, but not today because our listeners want to get on with things, and so do we. So we're going to end it here, but we will be coming back to the K2 to touch on a few other teams. We know Seoul Ilan, Jeonnam Dragons, Gimpo, they've all been missed, Cheongnam Asan as well. Lots to talk about still. We're going to keep talking over on Patreon, but not about K-League 2. I think we're going to look ahead to the FA Cup. But if you want to follow us, you can do on patreon.com/K-League United. Tiers start at $3, or you can follow us on social media at K-League United. And next episode, we will be giving away the FC Anyang shirt. So this is the last chance to win that 2015 match-worn Austin kit. All you have to do is retweet this podcast and tag us in it, or quote tweet retweet the original tweet, or tweet it out and tag us in it so we know you've tweeted it. Do something, as long as we know. We'll add you to the draw.